Hi, everybody. Let's get started. Welcome to this meeting, Strategies of Resistance, Workers' Power Against the Trump Regime. So my name's Ashley Smith. I'm a member of the Tempest Collective and the Vermont Coalition for Palestinian Liberation. Tempest is a revolutionary socialist organization with branches and members all across the United States, including one here in Burlington. So I just want to set the stage before we call up our speakers. Because I think everybody was probably out on the protest on Saturday, which was like the dam broke of all the pent up rage, anger, fear, frustration all across the country. And the estimates are as high as 5 million people hit the streets on Saturday, which was such a wonderful thing to be a part of, because we've been enduring practically, now what is it, 3 months of unrelenting attacks on working class people, on our wages, benefits, especially public sector workers who've been laid off, essential social programs robbed from people who are at the edge of survival, at the edge of poverty, especially people with disabilities who are at the risk of homelessness now with the pending Medicaid and cuts to SSI. So I think we gave a massive signal that the resistance has woken up and people are preparing to fight. And that should give us tremendous confidence. And then we got today, Trump blinked. He put these insane tariffs on the world economy that were about to thrust us into a global recession overnight and a pandemic bank run or a Great Recession bank run like we haven't seen before. All the treasury markets were seizing up. So the big capitalist called Trump and told him to sit down and shut up, which he did today. So he relented, but he's not relented from the trade war against China. He actually increased tariffs on China to 125% and maintained 10% across the board tariffs. And that's just a sign that Trump will not relent. This man only knows offense, and he is going to keep attacking, and he and his fellow oligarchic madmen have a problem of austerity at home and annexationist imperialism abroad. So we're going to have to continue the resistance, and we're going to have to get more organized, more powerful to stop him in his tracks, because he will not listen to lobbying. He will not respond to elections. He will not respond to bad press. The only thing that's going to stop him is workers' power. That is shutting the country down in political strikes until we bring this government down. And the seeds of that are already being planted. People probably read, and Matt will talk about it, that DEI programs were about to be cut all across the state. Teachers organized immediate emergency meetings all across the state on Zoom. And I was participating in one of them that had 95 teachers on it. And they put out a letter saying, do not do this. And lo and behold, the governor and the Secretary of Education backed off overnight for now. But it shows that if workers organize, we can win, even in these very scary, difficult circumstances. So I'm sure Matt will talk more about it. But that's the kind of organizing that we need. Rank and file self-activity of trade union workers and unorganized workers beginning to exert their power as working class people to shut things down and protest. And I mention that because we're building up to May Day this year, where we're going to be having 2 May Days in Vermont, one in Montpelier and one, as you'll see a flyer on your chair, in Williston, where we will march as a united labor movement in defense of immigrant rights, marching on the ICE data facility out in Williston. And if people don't know about it, I wrote an article about it in the Rake today that exposes the centrality of this ICE data facility in snitching on migrants all across the United States and all around the world. This is the international nerve center of immigration authorities in the United States, right here in Vermont. So what we do against this facility really matters. So I want everybody to organize your workplace, your trade union, and turn out on May Day to say that we will not tolerate migrants getting attacked in this kind of way here in Vermont, across the country, or anywhere around the world. So with that long-winded preface, let me introduce our wonderful set of panelists tonight. I'll introduce them in the order in which they'll be speaking. First, we'll have Helen Scott, who is a member of the United Academics, AFT Vermont, and a member of Vermont Tempest. After Helen will be Ayana Curran-Howes, who is a member of the Graduate Student United, GSU Palestine, and the GSU Palestine Solidarity Caucus. After that, we'll have Matt Guile, who is a teacher in Winooski, as a Winooski School District librarian and a member of the Winooski Education Association Executive Council and the Green Mountain DSA Labor Solidarity Captain. I didn't know you were a captain, but you're a captain. And Heather Bauman will be our final speaker. She is a member of UVMMC Support Staff United, AFT Local 5223, Vice President of Healthcare for AFT Vermont, and a member of the Vermont State Labor Council. So each of them will speak for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have an open discussion. So hold your questions and comments, and we want an open discussion so that we really can get into the brass tacks of how we're going to organize a fighting labor movement against Trump here in Vermont and across the country. So with that, I'll call up Helen.
Thanks, Ashley, and thanks everybody for being here. It's good to see you. So basically, the essence of the Trump regime, what they're actually about, is a huge attack on the working class. Like everything that they're doing, they have internal divisions over certain things like tariffs. But when it comes to the key platform, deregulation, tax cuts for the rich, slashing public spending, they're united. And all of the major planks of this platform are anti-working class. Decimation of the public sector, mass layoffs of federal workers, attacks on public health and education, cuts to benefits, criminalization of diversity, equity, and inclusion, rollback of disability rights, reproductive rights, and trans rights, dismantling environmental protections. All of these will have a devastating impact on the lives of workers. And for each group that's being directly scapegoated within this, there also lies an attack on all workers. The attack on trans people is an attack on bodily autonomy and gender equity, which all working class people need and want. The attack on migrants is an attack on the freedom to move and to work with dignity, which all workers need and want. The attack on Palestine solidarity activists is an attack on civil liberties, on equity, on justice, and the right to organize, which we all need and want. In this new era, we're all very conscious that a lot of certainties have gone. A lot of things that we used to think were certain they're just not here anymore. It's like we're inventing things for the first time. But I want to remind everybody of certain certainties that remain, that are still with us. And the first one is that workers remain the only social force with the real power to challenge this right-wing agenda. Much as the Trump regime would like to just get rid of all of us, he can't, right? Even under right-wing authoritarianism, the system needs labor to produce everything. Without workers, there are no Teslas. Without workers, there are no cars. There are no houses. There's no White House. The source of all profit is labor. So even at a moment like this, when the overall labor movement is weak, workers do have the potential power to bring the system to a halt. But that power is only realized through collective organizing. We don't have it when we're disorganized as individuals. Second, and stemming from this first principle, is that the labor movement is central to the struggle for social justice. Unions are the organized wing of labor. And ever since they were first established in the middle of the 19th century, they've played a key role in setting the bar for worker conditions. As the slogan goes, the labor movement, the folks who bought you the weekend, along with benefits, paid time off, restrictions on child labor, occupational safety, gender and racial parity. All of these were already insufficient, right? And now the Trump regime wants to get rid of them altogether. Now, reality check. Everyone knows that unionization levels are at a record low. In fact, just under 10% of workers in the US currently are unionized. And that's compared to just over 20% 40 years ago and around 30% 70 years ago. I will note, though, that this is misleading because the unionization level is actually uneven. So while the unionization rate is only 6% in the private sector, 28% of government workers belong to a union. Yeah. And union density in education is more than 30%. Well, this is obviously why the Trump regime is going after the public sector and education, because of this density of unions. Now, Project 25, which I had the great unpleasure of reading recently, forcing myself to read at least much of it, it's the blueprint for Trump's government. It states without any evidence that American workers don't want to be in a union. In reality, the majority of American workers have always favored unions. Every poll shows us, going all the way back for almost 100 years. And recent polls show that 70% of American workers want to be in a union. And that figure has steadily increased even while unionization levels have declined. It's not surprising because union workers have better pay and better conditions and more control over their work. Now, Project 25 also argues that unions unfairly exclude non-union workers. Why should they get better pay? Like they're going to raise everybody's pay? No, of course not. They want to drive down everyone's. But actually, consistent evidence shows that unions also raise pay and conditions for non-union workers by setting sector-wide standards. So the more workers are unionized, the better things are for all workers. Now, in this same period of overall decline, some sectors have increased unionization rates. So higher education, which is where I work, is one of those sectors. And graduate student workers, union density for graduate student workers grew by a stunning 133% over the last 12 years. So around 38% of graduate students are unionized. And these are worker-led unions. These are the model for the future. Even so, again, reality check, these are exceptions, and the vast majority of workers are not unionized. Many unions are themselves weak and not used to fighting. We're not in the habit of fighting. And the new regime is determined to remove bargaining rights altogether. So it's still a pretty bleak situation, even with the graduate students on our side. It does feel like an existential moment. It is an existential moment for unions and for workers in general, but it's not the time to be overwhelmed. As Ashley said, the mass hands-off protests showed that there is widespread opposition to Trump. They also showed a huge vacuum of leadership and organization. Mm-hmm. There was no next step, right? People went out and protested and then went home. Nor was there a sense really of where the power will come from that can actually stop Trump's attacks. As Ashley said, he's not going to listen to reason, say, oh, you've got a point, I'm gonna change course. The only thing that has the power to stop him would be mass strikes, which would threaten the entire economy. Now, the Democratic Party establishment offers no protections. They've pretty much shown that. They've offered no alternative. They kind of got us in this mess in the first place. Mm-hmm. Many of the major liberal institutions have just rolled over, e.g. universities, mm-hmm. e.g. law firms. Mm-hmm. Legal challenges are limited because the courts and the legal system were already rigged against ordinary people, and that's all the more so now with the Supreme Court under the control of the far right. So as the slogan goes, no one is going to save us. We can only save ourselves. And the best way we can do that is through organizing as workers in our workplaces collectively. Unfortunately, mass general strikes, where they're the only thing that can stop Trump, they're not something that you can just call. It would be nice. Let's have a mass strike and get millions of people out on the street. Current levels of organization are very far from what we would need to pull that off. But there is much that we can do as workers right now that will get us closer to that point and make a difference along the way in terms of protecting communities and fighting for what we need. So I just want to end with some bedrock principles. First, unions, of course, were won originally through non-legal means. Mass picketing, sit-down strikes, solidarity strikes, boycotts, workplace occupations. These are all very effective means of organization, and they're actually not allowed under current labor law. Yep. So in some ways, before there was legal protection, we were freer to use more of the means that actually would benefit us. Secondly, non-unionized workers can still wield power when organized, whether they have legal recognition or not. The so-called Red State Revolt of school teachers is one of the best recent examples of exactly that. Workers successfully struck, even though they didn't have the legal right to collectively bargain. Rutgers United Academics, as my partner organization, won a fantastic contract by preparing for and threatening a strike, even though they're not legally allowed to strike. They presented a credible threat of a strike. So what this shows is that levels of organization and unity are more important than formal rights. And these principles are at the core of what's called class struggle unionism. If you haven't read it, there's a book by Joe Burns called Class Struggle Unionism, which is excellent. And he describes two of the dominant forms of bureaucratic unionism that have dominated in this country. Business unionism, which is where you're kind of on the side of the boss and there's no democracy and they're pretty conservative and you stick to bread and butter issues and don't mess with social justice. Not a good model. The other model that he describes is liberal unionism, which is much more progressive, will engage with social justice issues, but while obviously different, they have one thing in common, and that is that they both look to non-worker-led labor activism. In other words, they're top-down. The union does on behalf of the workers. This is opposed to worker self-activity. Now, worker self-activity is when the members of the union are doing for themselves. And that's where you get the real power, the latent power in workers is through that grassroots organization. You've got the numbers, you've got the power, you've got the commitment. So whatever the character of the formal leadership in our unions right now, or indeed if you're not even in a union, our goal should be to increase the level of worker self-activity. And that includes bargaining for the common good, which means you're not just only in it for your own workplace, but for the communities around you. Bringing unionized and non-unionized workers together whenever possible. Working with other unions in and outside the workplace. Building united fronts to struggle for shared goals. That means you don't have to agree with another organization or another union on all sorts of issues, but you fight for one thing together to maximize your power, where there are points of commonality. It means fighting around political as well as economic contract issues, because you can't separate social justice from bread and butter issues, and that's crystal clear right now, more so than ever, because the same forces that are carrying out genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the West Bank are also trampling on civil liberties and bargaining rights at home. So you can see, you can't separate those two things. You have to fight on both fronts. So to sum up, whenever we mobilize, we must also organize. Specifically in our unions, we need to persuade more workers to get involved, while also pushing the formal leadership and giving them the confidence to take a visible stand and to encourage membership initiatives. Beyond unions, we need membership organizations that can rely on ourselves, not funded by the government. That's gone. And those organizations have to be democratic and inclusive, and they have to be independent from the two capitalist parties. And I would argue we need socialist politics that can make connections between all of the different struggles and provide a through line so that there is continuity when movements rise and fall, which they inevitably do. So here in Vermont, I just want to end. There is lots of things that we can all connect with and also bring into our workplaces. They include, for UVM, the National Day of Action for Higher Education on April 17th, which is a fantastic initiative called by many different unions and non-union groups across the country. We have an upcoming strike conference on April 26th, which is going to talk about the concrete ways that unions can prepare themselves for strikes. And then we've got the May Day on May Day in Williston. So mobilize and organize. Thanks.
Well, mine's going to be a lot less eloquent on my garbled notes here.
That's not true.
Let me just pull up a little timer here. Well, I want to start off by situating myself. I am a fourth year PhD student in food systems right now, more on the social science side of things. So I look at feminist care ethics and animal agroecology. So I'm often thinking about workers within like industrial animal agriculture and things like that, as well as like non-human labor, multi-species ethnography, that kind of thing. So that's like how a lot of this, everything, you can tie everything back to your work. So that's one of my central points. I'll be fitting in Palestine into my dissertation one way or another. Yeah, and using like feminist standpoint epistemology, I feel like it's good to like ground all of our knowledge is contextualized. So like this is how I got here. I was first exposed to union work when I was at the University of Michigan in 2020, and we went on a short-lived strike when I was there. And that just felt like the most invigorating work that I have ever been a part of. It was amazing. But there was like a real like shift in my brain that had to happen in order to be like, okay, thinking through all the things that are possible, because I could have been fired. It's a public sector. We're not allowed to strike. Although in Vermont, they're hearing something right now that may make it allowable for public sector people to strike. So let's cross our fingers there. And so that was my first exposure, and it was like full in. I hadn't been participating in the union up until that strike point, so the strike really brought me in. And then I came here in 2021 for the PhD program and started getting involved then. And kind of building off of what Helen was saying, like there is like a point where your union becomes like a formal recognized thing, but like the union is always been the union regardless of that like acceptance. So like that's probably one of the biggest hurdles with organizing graduate students is they already have a hard time viewing what they're doing as work or as labor because it's blended with them also being a student. So getting them to see the power behind that labor is one of the first things that we are trying to do. And then also that kind of like loss of sense of self and like seeing the collective, which Helen was also touching on as a graduate student, when you're doing all of this like incredibly isolated, like solo work by yourself for like 5+ years. And just trying to like get it out the door, defending against all of these other faculty and bosses that often perpetuate these toxic cycles of, well, because I suffered and this was what it was like to be a student, like this is what you also have to go through. So I did try to kind of organize my strategies in groups. So I have 7 things here that I'll get to. But to give an update on where our union is at right now, we are bargaining our first contract and trying to bring all of these things onto the bargaining table. We are still struggling to get like as much general engagement at our like general membership meetings and at the bargaining sessions. And I'll go through some of the strategies that we're doing to increase that. But yeah, we faced a lot of resistance. Even before we were a union, they were acquiescing and like starting to get at some of the things that were on our list of demands before we were actually formally a union, to like get people to kind of back off of, which obviously didn't work. And also painting the union as that third party, always doing that. Being like, no, it's us. We are the union. It's your friend Sam that's now an organizer. So in the everyday, we have formed caucuses, which have actually worked to bring in people that were not engaged with like the everyday organizing already, the Palestine Solidarity Caucus and also the International Workers Caucus. So sometimes people just engage with those, and then from those caucuses, you engage with the other caucuses that are doing similar things from across all the other unions. And now we have this like beautiful coalition that's forming at UVM with all the Palestine Solidarity Caucuses. That's where a lot of the organizing that I've been doing personally has been. There's a lot of people involved in like the everyday organizing committee stuff just within the regular union. So now I'm doing more of the Palestine organizing. We have a member resolution for Palestine that we are going to hopefully be voting on at our next general membership meeting. And in the everyday, we're doing walkthroughs, we're doing work-ins for meeting members where they're at for capacity. So encouraging people to just be a body in the room and bring whatever they're working on in the back of the room. These also are bargaining sessions, like anybody can come to those. So allies are always welcome. We actually have a rally coming up next week as well. That is our birthday rally because we're 1 year old on Tuesday. So I have a few flyers there that people can take at the end. But that'll be at noon on the House steps, Howe Library steps as well, celebrating a year since we officially became a union. And then kind of like making everything that you do super strategic. So like having the work-ins also like at outside of Board of Trustees meetings and happening right after a rally, trying to fit it into other things that are going on. And having really engaging like social media communications and like themes for our rally has been really helpful. So we had a holiday rally that was contractor coal, where we had all these members like making it really fun. Like that's honestly a huge draw. You have to be making it a social thing where like I'm organizing with all of my like best friends, and it's not a lift, it's not a burden. May sound trivial, but that's one of the biggest things. So doing that. Also incorporating, like I was saying at the beginning, like incorporating labor into the other narratives and spaces that you're already sharing, even if you don't see how it's connected now. I bet there is a circuitous path for you to work it into the conversation. I try to drop it in all of the conversations that I'm having, as well as my research. And another thing, like building the connections across all of the other unions and their caucuses, and then all the people that aren't in your membership, as well. So all of like the temp employees and undergrads and other like non-UVM groups too, because especially in this town, like everyone is connected to everyone. And so if like they're showing up and they're friends with other people, like that's been a huge draw as well. And then making additional opportunities to stir up conversation. So I'm a part of, and this is also commentary on like where support for graduate student workers in particular is coming right now. The university hasn't been providing obviously very clear instructions for international workers and things like that. They've been like just receiving very vague, non-committal things. They don't know if they can really leave the country and things like that. And where I have been receiving, and it's like very hit or miss by department, whether or not you're receiving additional support and like getting to have conversations with like the deans and things like that. But where I have been receiving support is actually from all of the different institutions on campus. So the Gund Institute for the Environment and the Institute for Agroecology. And it's in like these spaces that people are having more conversations where I've been able to like bring up the union and things like that to address like specifically other current events like the Title IX HR 28 letter and other like legislative outreach for all our trans workers and leaflets, spreading leaflets for members regarding ICE and things like that. So I think it's also through these like kind of side affiliations in the university that like we've been able to start to share more information, and they've been able to see how like the union is like a great body of their peers that are like mobilized and know how to organize and will be advocating for them. But anyway, within one of our lab spaces, the agroecology space, we had an incident where we were talking about like indigeneity in Vermont, and then Palestine was brought up. And then one of the members started sending really, propagandist things like through the listserv. And we reflected like as a lab on our values, and we're like, first of all, this is like improper use of the listserv, and invited that person in for a conversation, and eventually they left. So like the lab space having values tied to these institutions too, and like pushing, advocating for that, I think is hard to do a lot of times for researchers, like wanting to be like objective and welcoming to everyone, but also like we're here to be critical, and especially like social science researchers right now like need to be pushing back on the narratives that a lot of people are hearing, because in conversations that informal and formal conversations that I've had at conferences and stuff like that, like there was Michael Fakhri, the UN, I have his title here, UN Special Rapporteur on Food, who wrote a great report about the starvation happening in Gaza. Someone afterwards had been like, oh, well, that made me feel really uncomfortable. Like, why was he just talking about Palestine? And like, I was like, well, it's pretty relevant. And I don't know if you'd be saying this if it were any other group. But like in that, I like literally everyone else at the table like splintered off to different conversations, and it was just me and her. And so, but I like, a friend was sitting right next to me, and it led to her, being like, hey, like I wanted to talk about that later. And like, we had a great conversation because people are receiving narratives from whoever's in their close-knit circle. So like, just be talking about it like more nonchalantly and like boldly, I would say, fitting it into any conversation that you can. Really started to go off script here. And I'm past my time. I didn't even think I could do it. And then trying to get all this into our contracts with like the non-discrimination and academic freedom. They like flat out refuse to even counter on academic freedom for us because we're very different than faculty. We're not like actually teaching students apparently or deciding what we teach them. Yeah. I think that's a good.
Hello, I'm Matt Guile. I'm the librarian from the Winooski School District and member of our local association's executive council.
Captain.
You solidarity captain. Green Mountain DSA. So I just wanted to talk about how public school educators have been sort of fighting back and resisting. So back in January, when Trump was elected, so in Winooski School District, if you're not familiar, we have a large refugee and immigrant population, and our students and our families were scared, which I feel, Haley, actually, former Winooski High School principal. How's it going, Leon? Hey, I didn't see you there. But yeah, we have this really lovely, beautiful, diverse community, and people and families were scared. They were not sending children to school. Families were worried to show up for school events. So our association actually, and again, with a lot of other friends and a lot of other people pushing, but our association really got involved in advocating to get this policy passed for the school district. And so our association voted and endorsed it. We got endorsements from the state NEA as well. And again, organized teachers to show up at school board meetings to speak, helped facilitate students and community members. We got in touch with our PTO. Again, the biggest board meeting, we had over 120 people show up. It was beautiful. Yeah, Ashley was there. It was really beautiful. It was a community coming together to sort of show that they love and want to protect and protect each other. So through that, actually, I got involved in, so it's a statewide sort of Vermont NEA Labor Caucus called the Vermont School Workers United. And we're sort of a little more activist caucus within Vermont NEA, and had been organizing around some sanctuary school policy, trying to advocate for that statewide. And it had also been organizing these town halls that have been held across the state. We organized one in Chittenden County. We had 8 legislators show up. And our real goal there was to present an alternative to the governor's proposal, or Secretary Saunders' proposal, to redistrict the state into 5 districts, really slash a lot of money out. Also to begin the process of siphoning money out from public education into private education, which I think very much was always the intention of bringing Secretary Saunders up to Vermont from Florida. And again, it was a very powerful thing. A lot of people coming together to really advocate together. So the Vermont School Workers United, we also organized around really trying to push our state union to really step it up and really try to fight back. So we organized our representative assembly, which is sort of the statewide democratic organization, which is our rank and file telling the state NEA what to do. We organized a bunch of new business items. So we organized them pretty strategically. We started out with a statewide, it's a sanctuary schools new business item that's directing our UniServe directors and to use state resources to support locals in organizing to pass their own sanctuary school policy. The other thing that was really important about that is I was speaking to a room full of education leaders, and they all heard about how important it was to us. And the energy in the room when I started talking about it was electric.
That's great.
And we had a line of people. When I saw people coming up to speak at the microphone, I was like, oh man, we're in for a fight. But no, everybody was just wanted to pile on and talk about how excited they were. Passed unanimously. It was really beautiful. It was exciting. And we had a list of a bunch of new business items that we were bringing. We also brought the creation of a strike fund, which again, in order to build labor power, making sure that people feel empowered financially, in order to take that step to strike, we felt was really important. That ended up going to a committee, but we actually have some allies on that committee. So we still have hope that actually will end up being put in place, and we will have a statewide strike fund that can support people while they're on strike. we passed another new business item that was directing the state NEA to track incidents of curricular censorship. So anytime, and we specifically laid out so if anytime that a teacher was sort of told they needed to change their curriculum when they were talking about Palestine, we're talking about climate change. And again, that was something that really, really electrified that room. And it was really beautiful. People were really, really ready and excited to sort of fight for these things and wanted the opportunity to have something to fight for put in front of them. And then again, the one that we put last, because we actually intended this to be opening a discussion, and we were anticipating that this one was going to fail, but we were calling for the Vermont NEA to endorse statewide action in the event that I think the examples that we gave, this is not a fully inclusive list, but there would be a statewide action called if federal funding was revoked for special education students, if a teacher was fired because of their gender identity, or if an immigration happened in a school, we would be calling for a statewide labor action. So now in the new business item, we did not list exactly what we meant by that. But on the floor of the assembly, we did say statewide general strike. And that was something that was said, and that was something that people understood, that that's what we were talking about, right? And I was thinking, if I had a student that got taken because they liked a Facebook post about Palestine, I couldn't show up to school the next day and just be like, oh yeah, all right, I'm teaching and this is all great. I love these kids. I love my job. It's great fun. But I could not just show up and just pretend everything was fine and just move forward with my day and we're just educators doing our best. No, that would be something that we need to stop, and we need to say this is a line that has been crossed. So speaking together with the union leaders across the state and having that conversation where people are like, no, there are red lines that we are ready to again, that would be a wildcat strike. That would be something that would not be, endorsed. It would be something that would be outside of sort of our contractual right in order to do that. But there are moments where we do need to come together, and our power is, our power as a union, as a collective, is not granted to us. They don't give us the power to strike. That is always ours, and we can take it and use it how we need to. And I do want to talk about, again, this is all something that's happened very recently, but we did get movement on it. Yeah. So on Friday at like 5 o'clock, our Secretary of Ed sent out a letter to all superintendents asking them to effectively confirm that they're going to comply with the anti-DEI executive order. And this is what Ashley was talking about, organizing to resist that. And so the Vermont School Workers United had emergency meetings. We had a meeting on Sunday where over 80 people showed up. We actually had educator leaders from across the state talking about how we need to resist this and to stop this. There's actually a demo. So on Monday, the Secretary of Ed backed off of that a little bit. She said, I'm not going to ask the individual districts are not going to be required to certify that they're complying with the order. It's going to happen statewide, so the state is going to certify that compliance with the order. There are other states. New York right now has a lawsuit and is resisting it. There are others that are defying and resisting. I think as a strategic position against the Trump administration to sort of be coy and meek feels like that you have lost the fight. Then you're giving up before it's even started. So right now, there's an action taking place at the National Life Building, which is where Secretary Saunders' office is. People are banging on pots right outside of her office right now. And on Friday, there's actually, Education Justice, which is an organization that actually the School Workers United has been working pretty closely with. They actually have a student conference, and students are actually planning an action on Friday in resistance to this. But so I think I think, again, our role as public educators, we are the largest labor union in Vermont and in this country. And it was really kind of shocking at our representatives assembly, right? We went, there were some awards that were given out. We had a nice lunch. There were a couple little speeches. And then if all 7 of the new business items that were considered on that day were from the Vermont School Workers United Caucus, right? The meeting of the largest union in Vermont would have ended at 1:30 on that day after having a nice lunch. And some people saying, oh, that we gotta stand up for each other, but again, no real action having been taken. And usually, again, those meetings end 1:30 or 2 o'clock. We went until 4 o'clock, and people were fired up and really, really excited that these opportunities to resist and to fight were presented to them. And I think that's what we always need to be remembering, right, is that our power is ours, and we can't let nobody grants it to us. We need to take it. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather Bauman. I'm a member of UVMMC Support Staff United and Vice President of AFT Vermont for Healthcare, the second largest union in the state. We are the American Federation of Teachers, but we are also primarily healthcare workers in the state of Vermont. And our union at UVMMC is the lowest wage workers at the hospital. We were until this winter the newest union, but the security guards just organized. So we've got them. And it was lovely. And as part of the theme in the conversation, they came to us and asked for our support in their struggle to organize. And they're Teamsters, and we just double checked with them that being a Teamster means never crossing a picket line, right? Yeah. And when they said, hell yeah, we said, hell yeah. So ours is a union of low-wage workers. We are one of the most diverse unions in the state. Mm-hmm. And we are a union, a community that helps support the healthcare system in our state, and yet many of us cannot afford healthcare or access the services that we provide. Many of us are in debt for accessing medical care. Many of us fell off the Medicaid cliff or are just perilously, hanging on by our fingertips. And many of us are in debt to our employer and go to work every day to pay down debts that we owe to our bosses. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that the situation is ridiculous. And it's also ridiculous that it took us this long to organize. Mm-hmm. We had this conversation about the old face of labor. I remember growing up, going to a union hall and meeting I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know, it was I don't know what union he was in. He told me he was the chief bottle washer. And I always imagined that was a gig out there, that somebody could be the chief bottle washer. And now the face of labor as I know it, it has extended to a group of folks who don't necessarily consider themselves skilled. And it's interesting. And we have this highly entrenched caste system in the hospital. Yeah. And the folks that I work with are considered the least skilled worker. But you really don't want anyone else drawing your blood other than a phlebotomist, right? And you don't want anyone else cleaning the C. diff room before you go in there other than someone who's trained to do that, Mm-hmm. So it is a group of folks who are the new face of labor, who haven't always been considered the face of labor. And it's part of how we overcome this detriment that we have in the number of folks who are organized, is by looking around and starting to consider everyone a possible union member and helping to support their capacity to organize. I have a kid who is in conservatory. She's an undergraduate student, and they're considering organizing similar to the members of the sports franchise franchise teams, they sell tickets to their concerts. They never get a cent out of it. They're asked to come and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. We've got to consider the areas where we are giving of ourselves through our labor, and whether or not we consider our studies labor, they are work, and we have to have respect for it. We have to have respect for it by listening to the people who are providing these services and this labor and doing this work, and letting them help determine the direction that we're going. So for AFT Vermont, for Support Staff United, for myself, what I'm seeing in this this moment that is full of fear, but is this idea that we need to organize to dismantle these caste systems that have been holding us up and create structures that can support us, but they are structures and they are communities and groups of workers who respect their own contributions to their communities. And that has been actually one of the hardest things in my union is, one of the hardest things to overcome as we were organizing was a devaluing of the sense of the value, a devaluing of the contribution that we were making and our capacity to make a contribution. And I think what has happened right now, and part of what we're seeing at many levels, is this immediate capitulation to the Trump regime, because people don't respect their own capacity to resist, right? Yes. And we have that within us. So what I'm seeing as our need right now is to start to grow and nurture our empathy, our sense of connection to one another, and our capacity to contribute, and for the sense of what it is that we are contributing, that it has value in the community. These concepts of mutual aid, of stepping up and providing for one another, and seeing that we can do that, because things are going to get bad. Things are bad, and things are going to get worse. And no, we can't replace the healthcare system, and no, we can't replace CHIPS, and no, we can't replace Social Security, but we have to have a sense of what our own capacity is to contribute to one another and care for one another in this community. And it doesn't require a degree, and no one should count themselves out of that, right? Exactly. Yeah. So we need to really get in touch with that and remember that no one is coming to save us, and that we do have the capacity to save ourselves while we... This, so one thing that my union has been doing and has been in conversation, I think it's funny because, so the support staff at UVMMC organized, and the support staff at Porter organized, and the support staff at CVMC just recently won a contract, so that the whole network, the support staff, is now organized. And the support staff at CVMC was holding out. They just won their contract, and they were holding out for the duration article, trying to line their contract up with the nurses and techs. We thought we kicked ass with a $20 an hour minimum, and CVMC, those beautiful folks in Barrie, got $21 an hour. That's great. But wouldn't agree because they were holding out for duration. And the attorney from Downs Ratcliffe Martin said, what are you doing? Why are you holding out for this? And they said, well, come on, it's just a little thing. It'd be so much easier, and we're going to be one union, and wouldn't you like that? And he said, no. If we line up your contracts, then you'll all go on strike at the same time, and we'll crumble. So, the wildcat is out of the bag. One of the things we're looking to do is, to get us all together, to line up our contracts. We need to be able to walk out. But at the same time, this concept of an illegal strike is part of this idea that we don't own, what? I mean, even saying it, an illegal strike, this illegal speech, illegal activity, what this regime is currently doing is naming people as illegal, activities as illegal. It doesn't mean anything anymore, and it never meant anything. If you don't have the right to withhold your labor, you don't have anything. It is yours.
Exactly.
So as they spoke in the State House today about the right to strike for, I guess it was for UVM, for UA, and for the state workers, and it's just silly, this concept, but we need to start to own our own power in this situation, and I guess so. As we move forward, as we look to how to get through this, and not only get through this, again, it's kind of like the COVID moment where, everyone goes, oh, now we can go back to normal. Electing President Cory Booker is not going to get us back to a normal that we want, right?
Exactly.
Right? We have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity as abolitionists, right, to not only burn it down, but to envision what it could be and build it back better.
Exactly.
And so when we do that, we need to look and we need to create these communication systems. We need to be able to do what the NEA did and, be able to get our members, our friends, our communities together and to act together and strengthen. We need to have hard conversations. We need to have those organizing conversations. We need to have those conversations that scare us. We need to have those conversations with coworkers who we don't think are going to line up with us. But actually, maybe one of the opportunities in this horrible moment is that everyone is being attacked and everyone is feeling it, right? And so it is actually easier to find commonality with folks who it might have been harder with. So we need to look for those connections. We need to never capitulate. There is no situation where taking a knee, there is no amount of, acquiescing to this regime that is going to satisfy them. The appetite will not be satiated.
Exactly.
So there is no capitulation. We need to constantly remind ourselves in these conversations that, of course, everything that is related to economics is political, right? Your right to access healthcare is a political situation. It is an economic. It's all. So there are no more limits on those conversations, and we need to start to draw those connections for our friends and colleagues and community members who haven't done that so far. And we just need to continue to grow the sense of our capacity. We need to do it through not just organizing and finding each other, but through action, through May Day actions, through meetings, through conversations, and through strikes and larger demonstrations of our power.
That was an amazing panel. I think what Heather was just saying about solidarity is so important because Trump is forcing solidarity on us. He's attacking everybody without exception. And in that attack opens up the possibility of solidarity without exception. And that's the key thing. And I want to call attention to a petition that came out from 10 major unions in the United States that called for all the unions to stand up and fight in defense of immigrant rights. Not only immigrant rights, they named Palestinian union members who are under attack. And the key person they named is Mahmoud Khalil, who's a member of the Columbia Graduate Student Unions, and he's right now rotting in a Louisiana dungeon because of the Trump administration. And the president of his graduate student union, Grant Minor, is one of the leading Jewish activists on the campus. Not only was he fired from his job, he was expelled from the university on the eve of their contract starting. So that shows how the question of Palestine, the question of immigrant rights, and the question of trade unions' rights and solidarity is the moment that we're in, where you can actually forge that. I had another thing that I wanted to mention. On Saturday, if you were in Burlington, the MCs asked people, which industry do you work in? Who works in education? People raise their hand. Who works in healthcare? People raise their hand. Who works in government? People raise their hand. 80% of the crowd there worked in the most unionized industries in the state. 80% of them. There was not one trade union banner on the march. There were no trade union signs. There was not a trade union speaker at that rally, even though 80% of the people there were trade union members. That shows the gap between the potential that Trump is opening up and the lagging behind of the trade union leadership that I think what Matt described is the solution for. Rank and file organization inside the unions to push the unions out of the closet into the streets to start calling strikes in defiance of what the Trump administration is doing. We're not ready to do that yet, but the building blocks, the rage, the anger in American society and working class people is growing. It's a question of our organizing and bringing people into the strike school, into May Day, and getting our unions strike ready. And that means member self-activity inside these trade unions. So another rant from me. What I hope people will do is talk about what we're going to do to organize our workplaces, to strengthen our unions' fighting capacity, to turn them into mobilizing and organizing instruments of the class struggle. So if you just raise your hand, I'll keep a speakers list, and anybody is welcome to say anything they want and raise questions. See Travin there, and then you next. Go ahead, Travin.
This is the most important discussion I've heard in Vermont, and it's the kind of discussion we need to be having around the country. And you know, just the elements that Matt started to address, the creation of a rank and file caucus, that's critically important. We haven't seen—
I learned that from you, Travis.
we share the view that rank and file strategies are necessary. And the last time we actually had a really vital labor movement in this country, late 60s and the early 70s, and there was a huge number of strikes. That's the last time we had a mass strike wave.
Yep.
And almost all of those were wildcats. Those were unofficial strikes. And what's happened since, really, if you want to date it, maybe for the last 52 years, is the bureaucratic caste that dominates the big unions at the top have directed all of the energy towards relying on the Democratic Party to give us labor reform. And of course, they've gotten nowhere. And in the process, lost huge sections of the working class to the kind of populist right.
Yep.
Because people don't see an alternative. They want change. They need change. So another lesson of the possibility, the necessity, if we look back to what happened in 2019, when there was a government shutdown, and there was talk, Sarah Nelson, the flight attendants were calling for a general strike. Mm-hmm. And there was actually real motion in the airline industry. People were not going to work, for one thing, they weren't getting paid. And the billionaire class, capital, they freaked out, and that was the end of that. We look at what happened with the Muslim ban. Mm-hmm. What happened? And people remember, if you don't. I mean, thousands of people turned out at the major airports and shut down the airports.
Yep.
Well, they backed off on the Muslim ban. It takes that kind of creative, mass, disruptive action. Things like April 5th are great. They are kind of possible building blocks towards the kind of work that you're doing. But it's the work that you're doing and that we need to do, and to overcome the kind of resignation that a lot of working class people have, that nothing can change, because they haven't seen much collective struggle that would give them, think that we actually have a capacity as a class or as a union to do much. Now, fortunately, there's a radicalization of young workers, and we see that. You really see that in Burlington. And that there's tremendous hope. But I'm like so encouraged by this meeting. I mean, I hope to see many of you at the April 26th. That is really about trying to build both the vision and the capacity and some of the skill sets to do the kind of internal organizing and the external organizing, so that we can actually have real potential to have political strikes in this country, because that's the only thing that's going to stop what's happening. Thank you.
Keep raising your hands. I've got some people on. You and then Nolan.
So I'm Lyndon Higgins. I'm also at UA. I'm actually I guess I should stand up.
Stand.
I'm the chair of the Delegates Assembly at UA. And just absolutely in awe of what you've done, because I didn't know when I stepped up to be interim, and it looks like now permanent chair of the Delegates Assembly, what it was going to look like when the regime changed in Washington, D.C. But my question is, so the first thing I did was take American Association of University Professors trainings and, all this stuff, and it's all about, getting everybody involved. And so I go back to the Delegates Assembly and I'm like, we need to get into our departments and we need to talk to all of our members about the fact that you and I and all of our community are the union. The union isn't this third party. And they're sitting there going, we can't find people to actually be representatives in the departments because they're all too busy. And I go and talk to the faculty in my department, and the young faculty are there.
Yeah.
But they're terrified because they're pre-tenure.
Yep.
Or they're non-tenure track. And the old faculty are basically, we got ours, it's not that bad. And so there's this mindset of, we're in Vermont, our administration's not that bad.
Just wait.
And yeah, but there's this fishbowl sense in so many people that I literally had senior faculty when I was trying to get a conversation started about our tenure and promotion, which in my department requires a major grant, and there ain't going to be no more major grants. And the response was, well, that would reduce the rigor of the tenure and promotion process, and we really can't go there.
Oh my God.
And so I guess I don't really have a question except that it is excruciatingly frustrating to be in this position of leadership. And I'm not a tenure track faculty member, so it's kind of like, Lyndon, why are you even getting involved in talking about tenure decisions? It's really not appropriate.
Oh my God.
And then thinking about, we call a rally, and we're lucky if we get 50 faculty to come to a rally at UVM. That's a really good day. And how to reach out to members. I think part of the problem at UVM is that the workloads are so excruciatingly high.
Yeah.
That nobody's got the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see it with the grad students see it too.
Yeah, to be like, this is why you have to go though, because
It's
we're
hell.
gonna reduce all
Yeah.
our workloads and the exploitation, and right now you're exploiting me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm glad I'm here. Thank you, Helen, for inviting me.
Thanks, Linda. Nolan, and then Matt, and then you. And anybody, raise your hand, jump in. You don't have to have a fully formed battle plan. It can be a real question. I don't have any coworkers that have got a clue. Whatever it is, get it out on the table. So Nolan, then Matt.
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name's Nolan. I'm a member of the Tempest collective here and also vice president of the union at Howard Center. And I just want to first start by saying just what a fantastic panel this was. I mean, it was truly amazing, exactly what we need for this moment. So just thank you to everyone who spoke. And I think, one of the things that I think, I have a number of kind of disjointed thoughts that I'll try and get out quickly, but, I think particularly what this panel was talking about was the need, the way that this moment is demanding solidarity.
Yeah.
And I think Heather spoke to that beautifully. One of the things that, Howard Center, the union is actually, the leadership is fairly radical. And one of the things that we've always bumped up against as we've wanted to, pass motions and things in solidarity with movements outside of Howard Center is like, well, hold on, we'll get this pushback on let's just stick to what our union is about. So let's focus on wages and healthcare benefits for our union, because that's what this union is for. And this moment, this attack, as Ashley mentioned, of this just full frontal assault on every aspect of society is demanding that unions break out of that narrow framework and demanding that we understand labor as this vehicle for fighting back against all of it. And so it is such an exciting, it is both a terrifying moment that we are in and an exciting moment that we are in. But it is calling on all of us to rise to this occasion. And you know, it's both unfortunate and predictable that the leadership on a number of levels is not rising to that moment, right? The Democrats have made it abundantly clear that they will do nothing. They will rest on procedure and policy and decorum and just allow this sort of fascist administration to run roughshod. I had the displeasure of attending a emergency AFL-CIO statewide meeting, you know, calling on workers like get in, and the asks were to donate to their PAC and to lobby legislatures. Like I was infuriated by what the working class, what the rank and file was getting as the marching orders from the leadership. But then at the same time, like I was also just talking to Matt right before this meeting, and he was talking about how the mobilization of the rank and file within the teachers' unions is now forcing the leadership to catch up with them.
Exactly.
As the rank and file is active and getting going, the leadership is now going, oh, hey, we're going to build for May Day too. Like May Day is really important, right? But it is the rank and file pushing that line forward of what's possible, and then the leadership is slowly catching up. And that's what this moment is going to take, is that type of activity. And that is why I think like the May Day event that's happening in Williston is so important, because it is putting the migrant justice struggle front and center. Right? It is saying that the struggle and the attack against migrants is a labor struggle, and it is something for the unions to be a part of. So like inherent within that May Day event is that sort of cross-group solidarity that is building the type of fight back that we're going to need to see. And so I really hope everyone here will build that May Day event, because it is such an important kind of jumping off point for where we need to go. And then similarly, that April 26th strike school is so important. And I want to say, like, it's not just a strike school. It is also just about how to organize and be an agitator within your workplace, what that means. And so if you're not a part of a union, that's okay. Come to this school, because it's also going to teach you how to mobilize within your workplace to build a union. In fact, I just attended a meeting last night that was a residential program of workers that are looking to unionize, right? And so it was talking, I was talking to them around the advantages of a union and why all of the playbook that the bosses are giving to them around why, oh, you don't really want a union, we're a family here and we can just talk, right? Why all of that is just flat out wrong, right? So like, this school is going to teach people how to be able to organize in their workplace, even if you're not a part of a union. So like, these are the types of things that need to be happening. So I really hope folks will put on your calendar April 26th, joining that strike school, and May 1st, turning out yourself and turning out your coworkers to this May Day rally, because like, this is where we need to be going. It's a scary time, but it's also an incredibly exciting time, and we do have the ability to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overstating sort of the upswell of public educators. This was not a case of had a single match and an entire brush fire sprung up. Right? We had a small group of people that were pretty engaged, And it has been, we have, put out calls and then, who shows up. And it's really been, there's been a lot of really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
I think then when you have those big events and all of a sudden you have this big, everybody shows up, and we had 80 people on that call, I think on Sunday. How many people are going to show up on Monday? Right?
95 showed up on Monday.
Well,
I was on the phone on Monday.
Yeah, well, I'm saying next week. Right?
Yeah.
So we've had, we'll have a big event. A lot of people will show up, and then we'll have a smaller group show up the week after. And how to make sure that those people that are there and that are still have something they can fight for, that they can keep on advocating for. Right? It's a fire that you have to sort of nurse as it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. The easiest event that we did that ended up being I think it sort of felt like it broke a lot of barriers. We did an event, it was a walk-in Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So I went out in front of school before school started, before anybody's contracted time was, at a table of coffee and donuts, and a bunch of markers and poster board, and said, write a sign that says, public money for public education. Write a sign saying, fight for public education. And people are coming in, they were just writing signs, and by the time, 7:30 rolled around when everybody had to go in, we had 40 people outside, we had a bunch of students, and then I led a chant, and everybody chanted and walked into the building. And all of a sudden, these people that just showed up and stopped for a donut, and I'm in favor of public education, were on a protest, on a rally, walking into the school. And then I said after that, all right, take your signs, keep them. The next time you're at a rally, you've got a sign. You were chanting at a protest. You have a protest sign. And now we just have a bunch of teachers that have that experience, that barrier has been broken. So the next time it's easier to call them and bring them back out. But yeah, it's something that we have had to build, and we are hoping continues to. But there have been times when we felt like that little flame was about to go out. When you're on a Zoom meeting and you're like, is anybody else coming? Yeah.
I think I just want to underline what you're saying, Matt, because I think there have been a lot of hardworking militants who've been doing this for a long time, and now something big is happening around us, attacks on us, and people waking up on a colossal scale. 5 million people marched on Saturday, called by Indivisible, which is started by 2 Congress staffers in 2016. This is not a mass organization, but they caught fire in a bottle and it electrified people. But all those people are disorganized. I remember Occupy had a similar kind of feeling, all disorganized. Black Lives Matter, similar feeling, all disorganized. And so all the explosions went up like a rocket, down like a rock. And we have to avoid that this time. We need organization for the fight ahead of us. So go ahead.
Background, 50 years as a teacher, member of the American Association of University Professors, and the union makes us strong. I want to talk about content from my Politics of Cyberspace course, which I taught for over a decade. Practical guidance when you are using social media. If you are using social media, you can magnify the consequences of your posts. If you, 1, verify what you are going to repost. Never post something outrageous and exciting and fantastic without checking if it's true. Just yesterday, one of my enthusiastic colleagues posted a picture of 2 soldiers who had been killed in Palestine. Rubbish. I took the image and I went to Google Image, and within 5 seconds discovered that these were named soldiers killed in Afghanistan 15 years ago. We post misinformation, we are damaging our credibility.
Yes.
Next, make a point of spreading the accurate information that clearly demonstrates the fascist attributes of what this government and what this plutocracy are doing. Over and over, you will find daily analysis by thoughtful people in reputable sources, post the information. And if you're going to post an article, violate copyright, take the article's text as well as the link, because then on your social media, the full text shows up instantly instead of relying on somebody to say, oh, well, I guess I'll go look at the link. So those are practical guidelines. Finally, I will point out that for 50 years, on the back of my cards and what I taught my students included these values. Number one, reality overrides theory. I'm serious. When we hear total rubbish from the fascists, we challenge it with factual information. We don't let it go by, ever. Secondly, question authority. Do I have to say any more? I taught my students, I said, hey, gang, in this course, I'm an authority. If I ever say something that doesn't make sense, that contradicts what you think or know, challenge it. Don't just sit there, question. Say, well, excuse me, you don't have to be impolite. How do you account for that? Well, that applies to us. When we see these fascists making statements, we don't let them go by, ever. And the third one has kept my marriage alive. I make my wife laugh every single day. The third motto is better crazy than boring.
All right, we've heard all from one side of the floor, so go ahead.
I have a question just about the details of May Day and April 26th. Can I get time, place, and
Yeah, I was going to read a calendar at the end, but I can give the details. There's the strike school flyer,
None of the five
and
of you up in the front have actually registered for that. I'm just calling you out.
I'm actually going to be in too.
and the May Day flyer is out there as well. But I'll give the calendar now so that everybody knows the calendar of resistance for April in the run-up to May Day. At our Palestinian Land Day protest, Helen called us to march from Land Day to May Day. Here's your stops along the way. So UVM has a protest in defense of higher education on April 17th at UVM's Howe Library steps at 12 p.m. And this is the time to organize the faculty, because I met so many faculty members in April 5th, but they don't see their union as a vehicle of struggle. But this might be the opportunity for that. And you'll have graduate students and undergraduates and staff members. So the weak-kneed faculty will have buttress for the struggle. So that's on April 17th at noon at Howe Library. Bailey Howe's I forgot the old name, the eugenicist. So it's Howe Library steps. Then on April 22nd, we have the struggle for migrant justice in the age of Trump, which migrant justice is going to lead up at UVM, which is part of the Will Miller Social Justice Lecture Series, which is in Williams 301 at 7 o'clock. And if you get on the Tempest mailing list, I send all this stuff out, so you can get on that. Then the strike school is on April 26th at the Old North End Community Center from 10 to 4 p.m. And there's the flyer there, and you should get registered. And then May Day is in Williston. If people have been to that declining movie theater out in Williston, which the escalator doesn't work anymore and the carpets stink because they don't have enough money to wash them anymore. Anywhere, there's a nice green space out front with a bandstand. So we're going to assemble at 5 p.m. on May Day, and then we're going to march on 2A, Williston Avenue, on Harvest Lane, past the ICE data facility, up to Hannaford, and we're going to have a mass rally at Hannaford in solidarity with Migrant Justice's picket, and we're hoping to get thousands of people out there, because Indivisible is considering endorsing this, which means that it would be, along with Montpelier, 2 mass May Days in Vermont, which would be wonderful. So that's your calendar of resistance. Anybody else on this side of the floor? No pressure, but don't hesitate. Questions are fine. Go ahead.
I don't really have anything in particular to say. My name's Fiona. I'm a mental health therapist, and I also teach one course a semester at UVM, so I've been
part-timers.
yeah, part-time union.
Exactly.
So I'm eager to get involved, and I think that's why I'm here tonight. Is just I think a lot of people want something to do.
Exactly.
So I think one of our Leon's wife didn't come because she was like, I don't know, it's a union thing, and so I think about how do we just spread the tendrils out. Also I'm in private practice, so I'm a 1099 contractor with all these insurance companies, and we're not allowed to talk about our rates, and we're not allowed to do this and that. So, but we play an integral role in providing healthcare, just like the care providers at the hospital. It's like, how do we organize? We have power. And so, I'm just inspired and glad to be here and excited to plug in.
That's great.
Thanks.
Anybody else from this side of the floor? Go ahead, Tristan.
I'm Tristan. I work in student health services at UVM, and I'm new to the union of staff workers there, so Staff United at UVM. And I guess I just wanted to highlight what I'm taking from the contributions of the panelists, because it was extremely helpful in terms of orienting me and I think everybody here. And again, sort of getting the lay of the land of my new union, having been involved in other unions in the past. Clearly, it pays to stick your neck out. It's one of the things that I'm hearing. It's really easy to get demoralized with a passive union leadership, or even a union leadership that means well but doesn't necessarily agree with the idea that we should take a position on social issues, or that we should build solidarity with other unions. And I think, what a number of you talked about, that the individual conversations with your coworkers, with your students in some cases, and then kind of looking for the allies within your unions and other organizing spaces enables you to come up with some concrete demands that can actually start to shift things. So the language that you talked about, Matt, I would love to see that language as far as how do we start to advocate for a contingency plan, potentially labor action, even though that's illegal, and we want to change that, et cetera. Just the idea that actually starting to come up with that language and getting people organized around it can then tap into that sense of frustration and helplessness that people feel, and you can start to actually make a real difference. And then the other is what people have alluded to or talked about, which is this idea that an injury to one is an injury to all. I think about with the students that I see in student health right now, as you can imagine, trans students are absolutely terrified, right? And demoralized and depressed and anxious, and students of color, students from other countries, there's just this sense of impending doom, rightly so, because any day things could change dramatically for those students. So thinking about how we use our position within our unions and in our workplaces to actually think about defending those students and making that concrete. Because I find myself saying we're here for you and we're ready to support you to my students. That's lovely, but it doesn't mean as much as it would to see a walkout of your professors and your healthcare providers and your fellow students and so on, if something were to happen. And that something happening could be anything from students being deported, as we're seeing on various campuses, to language changing around, we've been talking about whether our language on our website is going to be changed so that we're less identifiably pro-trans.
Oh my God.
Yes.
The word is for right now, no, nothing has to change, don't worry, but you also get the sense that the leadership within the Center for Health and Wellbeing is just trying to fly under the radar. Maybe they just won't notice that we're friendly to people of color and to trans students and so on. So and I feel that's sort of the default position everywhere, right? Is if we just keep our heads down, if we don't cause a lot of trouble, then they won't notice that we're here. They won't go after us. The exact opposite is true. That actually pays to fight back. It pays to stick your neck out. It pays to fight demands. So really appreciate how oriented this discussion is like.
Totally. Yeah, the idea of duck and cover as a strategy of resistance is insane in this moment. Because Trump will be like, okay, great, it's open season. I can assault all of you because you won't resist. Because he's out for blood. UVM is on the chopping block. They look at what they did at Columbia. Look at what they're doing at Brown. Look at what they're doing to, you name the educational institution. They're gutting it of funding. And who's on the list? Middlebury is on the list of targeted schools. There is no doubt that UVM is next in line. And the idea that you can sneak out of the attack, Trump will be just like, okay, it's a green light for me, and I'll go after you. So I just think it's suicidal. And the other thing is existential. Howard Center may not exist. It's entirely dependent on Medicaid funding. If Medicaid gets cut, which the Republicans are proposing in their big, beautiful bill that Trump talks about, Howard Center's gone. Like, that's existential for the workers there, for the clients there. Like what you're talking about, it's all Medicaid, all that stuff. So like, this is a gigantic attack on all of us, and there's no hope but resistance. So I saw you wanting to.
Well, I guess I just wanted to say, like, not only does it pay to stick your neck out, it's your obligation to stick your neck out. And, you know, as we start to see these points of capitulation, you know, it's this, maybe we throw the trans kids under the bus and he won't bother us. Maybe we throw the disabled kids under the bus and he won't bother us. And I keep thinking about this moment after George Floyd was murdered, when Trump wanted to go out to Lafayette Square and all the kids were out there protesting and everyone was out there. And there was a change, and you could tell something was about to happen, and the National Guard started beating over on their shields. And even just watching it, you could tell something was about to happen. And the chant among the kids became white kids to the front. And that's the moment we're in, right? It's UA to the front.
Exactly.
Right? It's the white kids to the front. You know, we had in our union, and a lot of people helped, and thank you to everyone who helped. You know, we had Stephen Tendo get called up the second the administration changed. You know, and we were able to get there and get him out. You know, and who knows? You know, but we need to. We not only does it pay? It's our obligation. We have to stick our necks out in this situation.
In the back there, Paul.
Hi all, my name is Paul. I had a question for the panelists, and I share Travin's view. This is just a spectacular panel, and it's really remarkable to bring you all together. But I have a political, practical question about organizing for May Day, the protest on the flag here, which some of us are involved with. And it goes back to think what Matt said. We don't want to mobilize, we need to organize. And you guys all talked about incredible organizing. So my question is around how to kind of translate that into, you know, practically a turnout from many union members and other workers to May Day. I went to the school board meeting that we've talked about for the sanctuary schools in Winooski, and it was a really remarkable event. What I saw in the union was union member after union member talking about solidarity, the politics of solidarity, talking about an injury to one is an injury to all, talking about without risk, there's no gain. This was a union of people who had worked together, had experience together, and it's exceptional, clearly. It was also, a lot of the teachers had Winooski Strong t-shirts on. So it was a union that participated in Black Lives Matter. It was a union that was out on the street for Palestine, for Palestine's solidarity. It was a union that's been influenced by something bigger, by the social forces. Right? So, you know, those two things are coming together. So I'm just wondering how you think about that with kind of the importance of putting labor, which can sustain the resistance to authoritarianism and can offer a horizon for winning, putting labor at the center of this much bigger thing that's happening in the resistance to Trump, and then how you kind of do that in your workplace. How do you kind of, what's the next step for people?
Did you want to jump in the back? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I thought about it, but
I saw you raise your hand briefly.
I thought you were, when you were pointing, I thought you were, I was like me, and you're like him. And I wasn't going to say anything because if I say something crazy, it's because I haven't eaten since breakfast, and so my blood sugar is a little low. But I would say I've always, like my friends and colleagues, a lot of times they accuse me of being sort of like a very pessimistic person, that I always see like this gloom and doom that's coming. And I realized lately that I'm not at all. I'm very much like an optimist, maybe even like Pollyannish, because I sort of assumed that with all this that's coming, this attack on, I work at UVM, I'm sorry, I'm with United Academics, that all this stuff would be like a call to action, and that I was going to finally see my colleagues like step up and get involved and like express a commitment to the things that we've always said was important to us. Mm-hmm. Like a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, like academic freedom and freedom of speech. And now that that's under attack, I really thought that we would see like a rallying. And I'm part of the faculty senate at UVM, and I put 2 resolutions together recently that they don't say anything except I just pulled some excerpts out of things that the university, say that in air quotes, but really it's the administration, has said was important to us. And they're in our policies and all of our statements of the things that are our values and our principles. And I restated those in a resolution. And then I said, and so like, be it resolved, we the faculty senate, who've never really said these things, that we support these things, we support these things too. Like these are our values. And in order to get a resolution approved, you have to get it to the faculty senate, and you have to get the faculty senate to discuss it and vote on it. And I'm part of the executive committee, and I brought it to the executive committee, Pollyannishly thinking this will be really easy. We'll just put this on the agenda and we'll discuss it. And I didn't even get a second to my motion.
Unbelievable.
And
Chickens.
so I said, well, I'm not going to be defeated by this. I'm not a quitter. There's other processes that I can engage in to force it onto the agenda. And really, I need 14 signatures out of 140 faculty senators or members of the faculty senate. Well, I'll get that really easy. So I created a petition with my resolutions and I sent it out to all the faculty senators. And right now I'm at 14. So it's going to get there. But that's out of 140 people.
That's terrible.
And that is really discouraging, right? Like this you would think this would be kind of a no-brainer. And it's been eye-opening because I've gotten not a lot, but some people have actually said, I don't support this and here's why. And I appreciate those people getting back to me and saying, I don't support this and here's why. Because they're telling me and they're helping me to prepare my counter argument. But almost all of the responses is, I don't support this because of the things that we've been saying here. We need to keep our heads down. This is going to call attention to us. This is going to make us a target. And I'm like, well, then they have already won.
Exactly.
We don't need to lose this thing because they've won.
Yeah.
But people have come back with some like, no, we haven't fully lost because people haven't necessarily been fired for their speech, or people haven't necessarily been deported because of what they've said. So we have to keep our heads down because we don't want that worst consequence. And I think there's some validity to that. But really what I think is we've just made ourselves even more vulnerable because now we're trying as individuals, not as collectives, to stand up against this. And I'm feeling really defeated by this. Like it seems like I'm having to fight for something that should just be easy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't really know what the thing is, but I really want to know how you. It was really interesting for you to say like this didn't just happen overnight. Like we had to start building this thing, but I don't know how to motivate people if they're not already motivated by what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Yeah.
Got Michael, and then we're going to throw it back to the panel for final comments. So go ahead, Michael.
My name is Michael. I work for the state, part of the Vermont State Employees Association. I feel like we're at the beginning of a sea change, and it's a very early part of it, but it feels so much better than January, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this room even like this, you know, I'd say I was more cynical coming into this meeting, and it's very interesting. And so I think to not take too much stock from, I think what are the people who are the most invested in the system are going to be the least resistant to, they're going to be the most resistant to kind of like going all in. There's a dissident from Russia who said like the first thing about authoritarianism is that don't obey in advance. And that's right? And it's very true. It's a slightly different direction, but I just wanted to bring up that like today could be historic, or it could be just another throwaway whiplash day from the Trump administration. But you know, these tariffs, like all of a sudden we're suddenly 90 days. Okay, we're gonna give a reprieve, but then we're gonna have 120% tariff on China.
And nothing on 10% stays in place.
Yeah.
But it's like there was an analyst who said this is a war without smoke. This is a serious like kind of cleavage. And you can smell what would come from that. It's like the classic, okay, now we need to unite, we need to close ranks, our enemy is China. And it's actually smart on their part, because Trump is an idiot, right? And he was taking on too much, and now he's going to actually consolidate more around, let's all go against China. And so that may not come to pass, but I think that, one, we need to understand like what's coming. And there just happens to be an excellent resource for this, which I'm in the middle of reading, China and Global Capitalism, which was I highly recommend. And it's organized by Ashley here, and he's got chapters, and it's a really good book so far. And there's another one that I'm coming up on. It's USA versus China. Fantastic read, but one of many things probably people have on their plates to read and talk about, because there's a lot of details right now. So.
Thanks, Michael. The one thing I want to say about the China thing is like people, especially universities, need to think about this, because there are 300,000 Chinese foreign students that are at universities and keep a lot of public universities alive. And if they are pulled out or expelled by the Trump administration, you're talking about the collapse of whole universities all across the country. So like that again is an injury to one is an injury to all. If they come for the Chinese student, the professor who's teaching them is the next one in line. Like this is that kind of moment, and we have to think dynamically and systemically about it. The other thing I thought about the panel is like these are all people who either started a union or are building a rank and file movement. Helen was part of the organizing committee that started United Academics back when she was an untenured faculty member. Last century, when we moved here. And then Heather and Ayana both organized their own workplaces. And Matt is building a rank and file movement. And those are all connected, because the only way you build a union is through rank and file organizing. Yes. The only way you sustain and make a union fight fit is by rank and file organizing. So like that's the red thread, I'm a socialist, that's the red thread of this panel and discussion. It's not gonna come from the bureaucracy. It's gonna come from below, from rank and file militants with socialists right at the heart. Helen's a socialist, Matt's a socialist, Ayana's a socialist, Heather's a socialist. The leaders of the trade union movement historically have always been Reds. And we need more Reds, because our socialist movement in this country is tiny. But the socialist consciousness that's being built by this moment is massive. Like, I was looking at this May Day flyer. I can't believe who's endorsing it. People should look at this. This is crazy talk. Like, May Day, which is a march on ice, is endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers, the second largest union. We got to get the NEA on board. We've got the faculty union, which we're trying to get on board. But if you look at it, we've got Nolan's union at the Howard Center. We've got, anyway, you can look at the list. I'm not going to read it. But you can see the dynamism of this moment. So I'll just call on people to go in reverse order. So Heather, a couple minute comments, and then we'll end with Helen. Go ahead, Heather.
I guess I just want to...
You got to be out of here by 8.
Yeah, okay, so real quick.
Like 5 minutes.
Okay. I know that former President Obama was speaking, and he was saying, like, well, this is a tough moment and it may call for some sacrifice. And no shit, Sherlock.
Not for him.
And I hear everyone talking about fear. And one of the things that I think is most powerful about a working class labor movement is we know about sacrifice. We know about fear, you know, get afraid at the end of every month whether or not you're going to be able to pay your bills. You know, you have to sacrifice certain things to be able to pay those bills. So you can't push us away with a threat of sacrifice or fear. And whether or not this is the beginning or the middle or wherever we are in this, let's just mark this point and start to work from where we are.
Exactly.
So if you have 14 out of 140, that's the starting point. That's the starting point, and you have 14 members of your organizing committee, and you move forward from there. Wherever we are, we move forward from here together.
Minute.
I was just thinking about why we new ski educators have been so ready to mobilize, and I think we have we've been through a couple fights before that our association has really been successful and sort of won some real fights. But I think one important thing I was really thinking about is we have a really strong tradition of student activism at Winooski, and that has pushed us to step up in the same way, right? Our School Workers United is pushing our leadership. I really feel that our students are expecting of us to fight for them in this world, and I think that that the teachers feel that, and you know, I mean, that's a big reason I'm here today.
Yeah, one thing just to add to all this conversation about not ducking and covering is like being a new union, we've had conversations early on about like endorsing events and taking a stand on Palestine with our like member resolution, which is eventually what we landed on because we didn't want to make have something that wasn't representing like all of our members. But that was a conversation that we were like not saying something says a lot more, says so much. And we had pushback from some people being like, this, how do we know that this is representing our members without them being here in the room if we're a rank and file? And what we came to was like, we know we aren't representing the most marginalized of our members if we aren't pushing forward these things. Exactly. Which is what we're here to do. And then just like on the note of like, how do we get people to events? You just make it as absolutely easy as you possibly can. We're creating emails, texts. We have like phone banking, text banking, that has food and other social things tied to it. We walk with groups, like we walk people over to the event. We, make it fun. I think having things. You can get a lot of grad students to events with just having food. We also have 1 in 5 grad students is food insecure. So throwing those numbers around too. It was Grad Student Appreciation Week this week. So we have some good messaging on that. So kind of playing off of like what the university is doing, being like, if you want to appreciate us, like maybe don't just like recommend us go to the Rally Cats food cupboard for our food insecurity issues.
Helen, then I have a couple of announcements, and then we need help putting the chairs away. So Helen, announcement, chairs.
Really restate. You start where you are, and there are 7 UA members who came to this meeting. Yeah, that's half of the 14 members.
You guys should meet. That's unique.
The next step is to bring them together, right? Because there's a subterranean fire. Like every workplace, there are people who are thinking exactly what we're talking about in this room, but they're all on their own. And so we have to give the focal point to bring them to a place where we can jointly make decisions. I think we should definitely bring people to the strike school from UA.
And you should register for it.
Okay, Travis.
We will. Also May Day, but then I think what Paul asked about what after May Day is a key question. Like we need another focal point post May Day. I think a good thing for all of us to do is to think about what will our post May Day event be in our workplaces.
Yeah.
So maybe for that might be knitting together that small group of rank and file organizers who want to fight back against Trump, whatever it is in your particular workplace. so that we all bring our own post-May Day event, so that we are organising, mobilising and organising.
Couple of quick things and then cheers. So Helen called it a subterranean fire, so people know that's a quote from August Spies, who's one of the Haymarket martyrs. That's what he said in court when they were about to hang him. That is, if you think you can stamp out the fire of the labor movement, it will pop up here, there, and everywhere. It's a subterranean fire and you cannot put it out. That is what's building in the United States. And to your question, why we had a union-focused event is because that's where we have collective power. And without that collective power, we're toast, honestly. And so it's step-up time for people in unions. Just a reminder of the calendar of events. So UVM on the 17th at the Howe Library steps at noon for Struggle in Defense of Higher Education. Migrant Justice, the event on the 22nd at UVM in Williams 301 at 7. Register for the strike school, as Travis has told us, and then come to May Day, but don't come alone. What Ayana just said is get people in a car with you from your workplace, from your neighborhood. We're working on food. We're working on food at the rally, but we're worried that it'll be 5,000 people and we don't have any idea how to feed that number of people. But let's have that problem. So we'll figure it out. So do what Ayana said, which is organize people with you to come to May Day. And then in that car ride, talk about what we're going to do next. Because none of us are strike ready. We have to become strike ready. That's what April is about. That's what May Day is about. That's what we have to get ready to do. And it will be illegal. None of this is legal, but the entire labor movement was built in illegal strikes. If people have any sense of labor history, that's where the Teamsters Union comes from. That's where every single public sector union comes from. Illegal strikes where people said, this is our union. Whether it's legal, granted or not, we're taking it. So the final thing is Tempest is having a study group on the socialist strategy in trade unions on the, 2 weeks from Monday, which is what, the 19th? Is that the 19th? What, can somebody have a calendar? Organization. Thanks, Helen. 21st at 6 o'clock, we'll be meeting at Migrant Justice, and we're going to read an article by a building and grounds maintenance worker on the socialist strategy and the trade union struggle. So if you're on the Tempest email list, get on that and we'll send out the article and you should come. And if you're not a member of Tempest, consider joining because we need more Reds in the union. Without Reds, this train is not gonna drive forward. So join the socialists.